The message came on a Tuesday morning, and it changed everything. Or at least, it should have. The Zithrani Dominion had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. Their warships numbered in the millions. Their armies had crushed 17 different species into dust. When Supreme Commandant Velther looked at the small blue planet called Earth, he saw nothing special. Just another world to add to his collection. Just another species to break. He sat in his command throne aboard the flagship Eternal Conquest, his gray tentacles wrapped around the armrests. His yellow eyes studied the planet on the view screen. Such a tiny thing. So fragile. The oceans looked like tears waiting to fall. "Send the declaration," he ordered. His communications officer bowed low. "At once, Supreme Commandant." The Declaration of Subjugation was a sacred document. Every conquered world had received it. Every conquered world had trembled at its words. The message was clear and simple. Surrender completely, or be destroyed completely. There was no middle ground. There was no negotiation. There was only submission or extinction. The Zithrani transmitted the declaration on every frequency they could find. They wanted every human to hear it. They wanted every human to understand that their time was over, and then they waited. Velther expected panic. He expected governments to collapse. He expected millions of humans to run screaming through their streets. He had seen it before on world after world. The fear always came first. Then the begging. Then the silence of the conquered. But the humans did something strange. They laughed. The first response came from a young human in a place called Chicago. She had recorded herself reading the declaration out loud, but she had added music behind it. Fast, silly music with a heavy beat. She danced while reading the threats of total destruction. The video spread across human communication networks like fire. Within hours, more responses followed. Someone had taken Velther's official portrait and changed it. They had put his face on the body of a small earth animal called a cat. The cat looked disappointed and angry. Underneath, humans had written words like, "When you threaten to destroy a planet, but they just make fun of you." Velther's communications officer approached the throne with shaking tentacles. "Supreme Commandant, there is a problem. Show me." The view screen filled with human responses. Thousands of them. Millions of them. They had turned the declaration into songs. They had made jokes about Zithrani anatomy. They had created fake conversations where Velther complained about humans not taking him seriously. Someone had written a story where the Zithrani Dominion was actually a group of lost tourists asking for directions. Velther stared at the screen. His tentacles went still. "What is this?" He whispered. "We believe the humans call it comedy, Supreme Commandant. They are laughing. We threaten to kill them all, and they are laughing." "Yes, Supreme Commandant." Velther had conquered worlds where the inhabitants had fought to the last breath. He had broken species that had tried every possible defense. But he had never seen this. He had never seen a species look at death and respond with jokes. His chief xenanthropologist, an old Zithrani named Kethra, was called to the command chamber. She had studied hundreds of alien cultures. Surely she could explain this madness. Kethra watched the human responses for a long time. Her face showed nothing, but her tentacles curled tighter and tighter. "Well?" Velther demanded. "What does this mean?" "I am not certain, Supreme Commandant. This behavior does not match our models. When facing extinction, species typically show fear, denial, anger, or despair. The humans appear to be showing amusement. Are they too stupid to understand the threat?" Kethra shook her head slowly. "No, the humans clearly understand. They are making very specific jokes about our weapons capabilities and invasion tactics. They know exactly what we have threatened. They simply do not seem to care. Then they are insane." Perhaps. Or perhaps they are something else entirely. 3 days passed. The jokes did not stop. If anything, they grew worse. A human musical group released a song called Tentacle Daddy that Velther refused to let anyone play on his ship. Human artists drew pictures of Zithrani warriors crying while humans patted them on the head. A human game company announced they were making an entertainment program where players could defeat the alien invasion using only memes and bad attitude. The Zithrani fleet waited in the outer edges of the solar system, paralyzed by confusion. Finally, an official response came from Earth's governments. Velther gathered his command staff to hear it. Surely now the humans would show proper fear. Surely their leaders would beg for mercy. The message was polite. Very polite. Too polite. Earth's United Nations thanked the Zithrani Dominion for their creative communication and expressed hope that this was some form of performance, art or cultural expression. They offered to connect the Zithrani with qualified professionals who could help with aggressive feelings and included instructions for something called therapy. The message ended with a suggestion that the Zithrani take some deep breaths and think about whether violence was really the answer. Velther's tentacles trembled with rage. They think we are joking, he said quietly. They think this is a game. Should we send another declaration, Supreme Commandant? No. Velther stood from his throne. We will show them. We will demonstrate our power so clearly that even these strange creatures must understand. He pointed at the view screen, where a small lifeless moon orbited near the human planet. Destroy that moon. Let them see what we can do. The Zithrani Dreadnought Worldbreaker moved into position. Its main cannon, a weapon that had shattered continents, powered up with a sound like screaming stars. The beam struck the moon with the force of a dying sun. The moon exploded. Pieces of it flew in all directions. A cloud of dust and rock spread across space where a solid object had existed seconds before. Velther smiled. Now they will understand. But he was wrong. Within hours, humans had named the debris field. They called it Velther's Tantrum. They started selling small pieces of clothing with pictures of the exploding moon and words like, I survived the alien temper tantrum, and oops, they destroyed the wrong thing. Someone created a human video called When You Ask for the Manager of the Galaxy. It was watched by billions. Velther sat alone in his command chamber that night, staring at the blue planet that refused to fear him. For the first time in his long career of conquest, he felt something strange in his chest. Not anger, not confusion. It was doubt. What kind of species was this? What kind of creatures looked at death and made jokes? What kind of world had created beings who responded to terror with laughter? He would find out. He would bring his entire fleet and crush this planet under his heel. He would teach these humans the meaning of fear. But deep in his heart, a small voice whispered a warning. Perhaps, it said, he had finally found something that could not be conquered. Perhaps he had found something that had already learned to conquer the one thing that broke all other species. Perhaps the humans had conquered fear itself. Kethra had not slept in 6 days. The old xenanthropologist sat surrounded by screens, each one showing a different piece of human behavior. She had studied 17 species before their conquest. She had written books about alien psychology. She had predicted exactly how each civilization would break, but the humans made no sense. They must be in denial, she muttered to herself, making notes on her tablet. This is a coping mechanism. They cannot accept the reality of their situation, so they pretend it is not real. Classic psychological defense. She watched a human news broadcast. The anchors discussed the alien threat for approximately 2 minutes. Then they moved on to something called sports scores. A man was very excited about a ball going into a net. "Denial," Kethra repeated, but her voice was less certain. She switched to another channel. This one showed humans arguing with great passion. Finally, she thought, they were taking the situation seriously. But as she listened to the translation, she realized they were not arguing about survival or defense or surrender. They were arguing about whether Zithrani were attractive. "The tentacles are kinda cute," said one. "Human? Absolutely not," said another. "The yellow eyes are creepy." "I think Velthor has big dad energy," said a third. Kethra turned off the screen and put her head in her tentacles. On the planet below, humanity continued its normal existence with strange determination. Stock markets opened and closed. Children went to schools. Restaurants served food. Couples got married. A woman in Paris was very angry because her coffee was made wrong. The alien fleet hung in the sky like a promise of death, and humanity mostly ignored it. Velthor summoned Kethra to his command chamber. He wanted answers. He needed answers. His superiors in the Dominion were asking why Earth had not surrendered yet. They were asking why the humans were still laughing. "Explain this species to me," Velthor demanded. "I have conquered worlds of warriors. I have broken empires of scholars. But I have never seen anything like this." Kethra chose her words carefully. "The humans appear to have a unique relationship with death, Supreme Commandant. They know they are mortal. They know their lives are short. And yet they have built a culture around not caring. Not caring about death. Not caring about fear. They have a saying, if you cannot change something, laugh at it." They have another, "I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees." They seem to believe that fear is a choice, and they have chosen to reject it. Velthor leaned forward. "That is impossible. Fear is natural. Fear is survival. For most species, yes. But the humans evolved on a very dangerous world. Everything on their planet tried to kill them. The weather, the animals, the plants, even the invisible tiny creatures they call bacteria. They should have died 1,000 times over. Instead, they learned to laugh. Laughing did not kill the predators that hunted them. No, but laughing kept them from running away. Laughing kept them together. A species that can joke about danger is a species that can face it. That is why they are still alive, Supreme Commandant. They are very, very good at facing things that should kill them." Velthor was quiet for a long moment. "You are saying they are not weak. I am saying they may be the opposite of weak. I am saying their humor is not denial. It is armor." Velthor did not want to believe this. He could not believe this. He had conquered too many worlds to be stopped by creatures who made jokes about his face tentacles. "We will proceed with the invasion," he declared. "If they will not fear us, they will die." The Dominion fleet began its approach. 1,000 warships moved toward Earth in perfect formation. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy a continent. Together, they could burn the planet to ash. But as the fleet drew closer, Velthor noticed something strange on his sensors. Signals were bouncing between Earth and its orbital satellites at an unusual rate. Energy readings were spiking in odd locations around the planet. Something was happening down there. "What are they doing?" he asked his tactical officer. The officer studied the readings with confusion. "We are not certain, Supreme Commandant. There appears to be significant activity at locations we previously identified as shopping centers. Shopping centers? Yes, large buildings where humans purchase consumer goods. There are also unusual readings from locations marked as sports stadiums, entertainment complexes, and something called a theme park." Velthor frowned. This made no sense. Why would the humans be preparing for war in their leisure facilities? Were they going to defend themselves with carnival rides and discount clothing? He ordered surveillance drones to take closer looks at these locations. What the drones found made his blood run cold. Beneath the shopping centers, enormous doors were opening. Massive platforms were rising from underground bunkers. And on those platforms sat weapons. Real weapons. Military weapons. Things that looked like they could actually hurt a Zithrani warship. The sports stadiums were opening like flowers, revealing hidden missile batteries. The theme parks were launching drones by the thousands. The entire planet was transforming before his eyes. They were hiding, Velther whispered. This whole time, they were hiding. More reports came in. Satellites that had appeared to be civilian communication devices were actually weapons platforms. Asteroids in the outer system were changing course, revealing themselves as disguised kinetic bombardment vehicles. Ships marked as cargo freighters and mining vessels were powering up weapons systems. The humans had been preparing for this day. They had been preparing for years, maybe decades. They had built a defense network across their entire solar system and hidden it behind a mask of normality. And while they built their weapons, they had laughed. They had made jokes and memes and silly videos. They had convinced the Zithrani that they were harmless idiots who did not understand the danger, that it had all been a trick. The greatest trick Velther had ever seen. A new transmission came through from Earth. This time, it was not from politicians or comedians. It was from a woman in a military uniform. She had gray hair and a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Hello, Commandant Velther," she said. "My name is Admiral Sarah Kowalski, and I am the commander of Earth's Defense Forces. I wanted to thank you for giving us time to wake up our systems. We usually keep them powered down to save energy, but your moon demonstration gave us a nice window to get everything ready." Velther stared at the screen. "You were stalling." "We were having fun," the Admiral replied. "We can do both. That is another thing humans are good at. Now, I believe you came here for a war. Would you like to proceed, or would you like to discuss other options?" Velther looked at the tactical display. His 1,000 ships faced a defense network that spread across an entire solar system. He looked at the Admiral's smile. He looked at the planet that had spent a week laughing at him while secretly preparing to fight. He had two choices. He could retreat and face disgrace, or he could attack and face whatever the humans had prepared for him. Velther was a conqueror. He had never retreated in his life. "All ships," he ordered, "begin the attack." And the smiling Admiral simply nodded. "We were hoping you would say that." The first wave of Zithrani fighters screamed toward Earth at speeds that would have been impossible for most species to track. There were 10,000 of them, each one piloted by a warrior who had trained since birth for combat. They flew in perfect formation, a beautiful and deadly pattern that had broken the defenses of a dozen worlds. They expected resistance. They expected missiles and energy beams and desperate last stands. What they got was something else entirely. The human defense platforms fired, but not with the weapons the Zithrani knew. The air filled with small objects moving at incredible speeds. Not missiles, not energy bolts, just tiny pieces of metal, thousands of them, filling the space between the fighters like a deadly cloud. The Zithrani called it primitive. Then the metal pieces hit their shields. Each piece was small. Each piece was harmless alone. But together, they stripped away shields in seconds. Fighters began to tumble and burn. The perfect formation became a chaos of explosions. Velther watched from his command ship, his tentacles clenched tight. "What are those weapons?" His weapons officer studied the readings with wide eyes. "They are simply throwing metal at us, Supreme Commandant. Very small, very fast metal. Our shields are designed for energy weapons. They were not prepared for this. Then adapt the shields." We are trying, but the officer stopped as another wave of fighters vanished from the display. Supreme Commandant, we have lost 4,000 fighters in the first 10 minutes. On Earth, Admiral Kowalski watched the same battle from her command center deep beneath a mountain. Around her, hundreds of officers worked their stations with calm efficiency. Some of them were drinking coffee. One was eating a sandwich. "The kinetics are working well," said her second-in-command, General Park. "Their shields cannot handle mass impact." "We knew they would not," Kowalski replied. "The first rule of fighting an unknown enemy: assume they are not ready for the stupid solution. Nobody expects you to just throw rocks at them. The rocks are moving at 50 kilometers per second. Still rocks." A cheer went up from one section of the command center. Kowalski looked over to see her signals intelligence team high-fiving each other. "What happened?" The team leader grinned. "We got into their communications network, Admiral. We are broadcasting now." "Broadcasting what?" "A song, ma'am. A very annoying song. It replaces their battle orders on random frequencies." Kowalski almost smiled. "Almost. Psychological warfare?" "The best kind." "We are also sending fake surrender offers." "Not from us?" "From them. Half their fleet thinks the other half has already given up." The battle continued, and humanity showed exactly what it had learned from thousands of years of fighting itself. The Zithrani fought with honor. They fought with rules. They announced their attacks and expected their enemies to respond properly. They had conquered species who fought the same way. It was almost elegant, like a deadly dance. Humans did not dance. Humans fought dirty. A Zithrani carrier group moved toward a defensive platform above South America. They followed standard assault patterns, closing distance before launching their strike craft. They did not expect the platform to self-destruct. The explosion took out 3 carriers and their escorts. The platform had been filled with nuclear weapons. The humans had sacrificed it deliberately, knowing the Zithrani would come close. "They destroyed their own station," Belther said, unable to believe what he was seeing. "Yes, Supreme Commandant. And they are doing it again." All across the battle, humans were sacrificing their own assets in ways that made no tactical sense. Pilots rammed their damaged ships into Zithrani vessels instead of ejecting to safety. Ground stations continued firing even as orbital strikes rained down on them. A single human destroyer, engines destroyed and hull burning, managed to drift close enough to a Zithrani battleship to trigger its core overload. Both ships vanished in a ball of white light. The Zithrani had never seen anything like it. They valued their warriors. They protected their lives. The idea of deliberately dying to take an enemy with you was not just strange to them. It was horrifying. And through it all, the humans kept making jokes. Captured communications showed human soldiers laughing as they fought. Pilots insulted Zithrani anatomy over open channels. Someone managed to paint a crude image on the hull of a Zithrani destroyer before destroying it. Ground forces adopted battle cries that made no sense, shouting things like, "Remember the memes." "And this is for blowing up our moon, you tentacle-faced losers." Admiral Kowalski received reports from battlefields around the world. The Zithrani had landed troops in several locations, but the invasions were not going well. Human soldiers fought with a fury that the alien warriors could not match. Not because humans were stronger or better trained, but because humans genuinely did not seem to care if they died. "The enemy is experiencing significant morale problems," General Park reported. "Our psychological operations are working. They do not understand why we keep fighting. They do not understand why we are laughing." "Good," Kowalski said. "Fear is a weapon. We taught them that. Now they are learning that fearlessness is a weapon too." By hour 6, the Zithrani assault had stalled. By hour 10, they were losing. By hour 12, Velther was facing something he had never experienced: the possibility of defeat. His command staff gathered around him, their tentacles drooping with exhaustion and fear. The beautiful fleet that had terrified 17 worlds was burning. Hundreds of ships drifted dead in space. The planet below still glowed with the lights of human cities, still broadcasting its stupid songs and terrible jokes. "We should retreat," said his tactical officer quietly. "We can return with more forces." "The Dominion does not retreat," Velther said. But his voice was hollow. "Supreme Commandant, we have lost 400 ships. We have lost 60,000 warriors. The humans show no signs of surrendering. They show no signs of slowing down. Every time we destroy one of their weapons, they reveal another. Every time we kill one of their soldiers, 10 more appear." Cathara, the old xenanthropologist, spoke for the first time in hours. "I told you, Supreme Commandant. They evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. They have been at war since before they could walk upright. Not with other species. With themselves. With their planet. With existence itself." She gestured at the view screen, where another Zithrani cruiser was breaking apart under human fire. "We thought we were bringing war to them. But war is their natural state. They have been waiting for someone like us. They have been preparing for this moment since they first looked up at the stars and wondered what might be looking back." Velther closed his yellow eyes. The doubt he had felt that first night, when the humans had laughed at his threats, had grown into something larger. He understood now. He understood too late. The humans had not been afraid because they had faced fear every day of their existence. They had not taken him seriously because they have faced threats like him before. Not aliens, but plagues that killed millions. Wars that burned continents. Ice ages that covered their world in frost. They had survived everything their universe had thrown at them. What was one alien invasion compared to all of that? Velther opened his eyes. His tentacles trembled. But he made the only decision he could make. "Open a channel to the human command," he said. Tell them the Supreme Commandant wishes to discuss terms." 14 hours after the battle began, the Zithrani Dominion surrendered for the first time in its 3,000-year history. And somewhere on Earth, in a shelter deep underground, a child asked their parent what was happening. The parent smiled and said, "We won. Were you scared?" The child thought the parent laughed. "Of course we were scared. Everyone was scared. But we were funny too. And sometimes, being funny is the same thing as being brave." The war was over, but the lessons were just beginning. Velther sat in a human room on a human ship, surrounded by human guards who looked at him with expressions he could not read. Were they angry? Amused? Pitying? He could not tell. Human faces were strange to him, with their small mouths and lack of proper tentacles. The room was comfortable enough. The humans had given him a chair that fit his body, food that he could eat, and a window that looked out at the stars. They had not beaten him or tortured him. They had simply captured him and brought him here. He had expected cruelty. He had given cruelty to his own prisoners over the years. But the humans seemed to have no interest in revenge. They brought him meals. They asked if he needed anything. A young human soldier even tried to teach him a card game. Though Velther's tentacles made holding the cards difficult, it was confusing. It was deeply, deeply confusing. Admiral Kowalski came to see him on the 3rd day of his captivity. She entered the room alone, without guards, and sat down across from him as if they were old friends meeting for a chat. "Commandant," she said, "how are you feeling?" "I am a prisoner of war." "Yes, you are." "That does not answer my question." Velther studied her face. She looked tired. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her gray hair was messy. But she was smiling, and the smile seemed genuine. "I am." Confused, he admitted. I do not understand your species. That is fair. We do not always understand ourselves. You defeated the greatest military force in the known galaxy. You should be celebrating. You should be proud. Instead, you are here talking to me as if nothing important happened. Kowalski leaned back in her chair. Something important did happen. Many people died. On both sides. That is not something to celebrate. It is something to learn from. Your people were laughing during the battle. I saw the recordings. They made jokes while they killed my warriors. Yes, we do that. Why? The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer. Do you know how many wars humanity has fought? Just among ourselves, I mean. Before you arrived, Velther shook his head. Thousands. Tens of thousands. We have been killing each other since before we had proper weapons. We used rocks and sticks and our bare hands. We fought over food, over land, over ideas, over things so small that we cannot even remember them now. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. We learned something from all that death. We learned that if you let the horror overwhelm you, you break. You become frozen. You cannot fight, cannot think, cannot do what needs to be done. So we developed a defense mechanism. We learned to laugh, but laughing does not stop the death. No, it does not. But it keeps us functioning. It keeps us human. Our soldiers make jokes not because they are not afraid, but because they are terrified. The jokes help them control the fear. They help them keep fighting when every instinct says to run away. She turned back to face him. Your species conquers through fear. You make your enemies so afraid that they surrender. It is a good strategy. It has worked on many worlds. But it could never work on us. We have already faced every fear you can imagine. We have already learned to laugh at all of them. Lothar thought about this. He thought about the humans who had rammed their ships into his fleet. He thought about the soldiers who had held their positions until the very end. He thought about the jokes they had made while dying. Your people are insane, he said, but there was no anger in his voice. Only wonder. Probably, Kowalski agreed. But we are alive. And so are you. Over the following days, Velther was allowed to speak with other Zithrani prisoners. He learned what had happened during the battle from their perspectives, and each story was stranger than the last. A Zithrani captain told him about a human pilot who had ejected from her burning fighter, drifted through space for an hour, and then somehow landed on a Zithrani destroyer. She had broken through an airlock, fought her way to the engine room, and destroyed the ship from the inside. When they found her body, she had been smiling. A warrior from the ground invasion described how humans had used ridiculous tactics that no proper military would ever consider. They had released animals to confuse Zithrani sensors. They had played loud music to disrupt communications. One group had dressed in strange costumes and charged at the alien troops while screaming words that made no sense. They were not even proper soldiers, the warrior said, his tentacles shaking. They were civilians, farmers and teachers and people who worked in offices. But they fought as if they had been warriors their whole lives. They had been, Velther said slowly. They had been warriors their whole lives. Just not against aliens. Against their world. Against each other. Against everything. Cathera was brought to visit him a week after the battle. The old xenanthropologist looked even more tired than Velther felt, but her eyes were bright with something new. Interest, fascination, understanding. I was wrong about them, she said. In my first analysis, I said they were in denial. I thought their humor was a shield against reality. But it is not a shield. It is a weapon. They use laughter to process fear, yes. But they also use it to confuse their enemies, to boost their own morale, to keep fighting when fighting seems impossible. They are using it on us right now, Valther said. The guards tell jokes. The doctors treating our wounded make amusing comments. They are not being cruel. They are being themselves. Yes, and it is working. Our warriors are confused. They expected to be hated. Instead, they are being treated with kindness and humor. Some of them are starting to laugh along with the humans. Valther nodded slowly. He had seen it himself. Just yesterday, a human soldier had taught a group of Zithrani prisoners a song. A stupid, silly song about a creature called a shark that lived in water. The prisoners had sung along, their translation devices turning the words into something approximating music. For a moment, they had not been enemies. They had just been people. Strange people from different worlds, but people nonetheless. What happens now? Valther asked. Kethra's tentacles curled in the Zithrani equivalent of a shrug. I do not know. The humans are discussing it. They do not seem interested in conquering us in return. They talk about trade, cultural exchange, something called tourism. They defeated the greatest empire in the galaxy, and they want to trade with us? I believe they want to be friends with us. Valther sat in silence for a long time, thinking about the strange species that had first laughed at his threats, then destroyed his fleet, and now wanted friendship. He thought he was beginning to understand them. Not completely. Perhaps no one could completely understand humans, but enough to know one thing. He was glad, in a strange way, that they had won, because a galaxy with humans in it was going to be a very interesting place. Confusing and chaotic and probably quite funny, but definitely interesting. The treaty negotiations took place on the moon. Not Earth's moon, which was still a field of debris from Valther's demonstration. A different moon, one of the larger ones circling a planet the humans called Jupiter. The humans had built a station there, and they offered it as neutral ground. Valther arrived with a small delegation. The Dominion had sent him back into the field, partly because he understood the humans better than anyone, and partly because he was already disgraced. If the negotiations went badly, he would take the blame. If they went well, others would take the credit. Such was the way of Zithrani politics. But Valther did not care about politics anymore. He cared about understanding. Admiral Kowalski led the human delegation. She wore a formal uniform now, with medals and ribbons that Valther did not recognize. But her smile was the same one she had shown him in his prison cell. Warm, tired, genuine. The first days of negotiation were formal and careful. Both sides discussed territory and resources and the technical details of peace. But on the fourth day, the talks moved to something more interesting. The humans wanted to know about the Dominion. The Zithrani wanted to know about Earth. Tell me about your conquered worlds, Kowalski said. What were the species like? Valther thought about the question carefully. They were civilized, peaceful. Some had technology beyond even ours. But they had never known true conflict. They had evolved on gentle worlds, with no predators, no competition, no reason to develop the instincts of warriors. And when you came, they did not know how to fight. They tried, of course. Some resisted for years. But in the end, they all surrendered. They had never learned to face death without fear. They had never needed to. Kowalski nodded slowly. Paradise made them weak. Yes, I did not think of it that way at the time. I simply thought them inferior. But now I understand. They were not inferior. They were unprepared. Their worlds had not taught them how to be strong. Earth taught us, Kowalski said. We came from a world of ice ages and volcanoes and diseases and predators and each other. Every generation faced something that could have ended us. We survived by being stubborn and creative and absolutely refusing to give up. She paused, then added something that surprised Valther. We also survived by working together. by building communities, by caring for each other. The same species that fights so hard also loves very deeply. We will sacrifice everything for the things we care about. That is why we won, Commandant. Not because we were better warriors, because we were protecting our home. Velther absorbed this. He thought about his own people, who fought for glory and conquest. He thought about the other species the Dominion had crushed, who had fought for survival but lacked the will to see it through. The humans fought for something different, something stronger. You could destroy us, he said quietly. You have the technology now. You have captured our ships, studied our weapons. You could build a fleet and crush the Dominion the way we have crushed so many others. We could, Kowalski agreed. Why do you not? The Admiral looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She laughed. Not a mocking laugh, not a cruel laugh. Just a genuine sound of amusement. Because that would be boring, she said. Commandant, we have spent our entire history fighting. Fighting each other, fighting our world, fighting everything. We are very, very good at it. But we are tired. We want something new. Something new? Trade, art, stories, food. We want to learn about your culture and share ours with you. We want to explore the galaxy together instead of conquering it. We want allies, not subjects. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. The Dominion has ruled through fear for 3,000 years. That works until you meet someone who cannot be scared. Now you have a choice. You can try to rebuild your fleet and come back for another war. You will lose. We both know it. Or you can try something different. You can try being our friends. Velther looked at her extended hand. He had learned this human gesture over the past weeks. It was an offer of peace, of trust, of connection. Strange how something so simple could mean so much. He thought about his people. He thought about the worlds they had conquered. He thought about the endless cycle of fear and submission that had defined the Dominion for millennia. And he thought about the humans, who laughed at death and fought like demons and then offered kindness to their defeated enemies. Maybe the humans were right. Maybe there was a better way. Velther extended his tentacle and wrapped it around Kowalski's hand. The gesture was awkward, but the meaning was clear. Friends, then, he said. But I warn you, Admiral, we Zithrani are not very good at friendship. We have no practice. Kowalski grinned. Lucky for you, humans are experts at making friends. Even with people who tried to kill us. Especially with people who tried to kill us. It is one of our stranger qualities. The treaty was signed 2 days later. The news spread across the galaxy at the speed of light, carried by the Dominion's own communication networks. The unstoppable empire had been stopped. The conquerors had been conquered. And instead of being destroyed, they were being welcomed. Many species watched in disbelief. Some waited for the trick, the trap, the inevitable human revenge. But it never came. Instead, human ships began traveling to Dominion worlds, carrying traders and artists and teachers. Zithrani delegations visited Earth, where they were treated as honored guests instead of former enemies. The humans taught the Zithrani about humor. It took time. Zithrani did not naturally find things funny. But slowly, gradually, some of them began to understand. The first Zithrani joke was recorded 6 months after the treaty, when a young warrior made a comment about human tentacle envy. The humans laughed for 10 minutes. Velther stayed on Earth as an ambassador. He learned to eat human food and watch human entertainment and understand human culture. He never fully grasped the humor, but he appreciated it. He appreciated what it represented. The species that had faced the worst the universe could offer and had responded by laughing. 50 years passed. The galaxy changed in ways no one had expected. The Dominion transformed from an empire of fear to a federation of trade and cooperation. Other species, seeing what had happened, began to emerge from hiding. They wanted to meet the strange creatures who had defeated the conquerors and then befriended them. Humans spread across the stars, bringing their chaos and creativity and terrible jokes with them. They built colonies and stations and ships that looked nothing like anyone had ever seen. They made friends with species that had been enemies for millennia. They found problems that no one had been able to solve and solved them through stubbornness and creativity and the absolute refusal to admit defeat. And everywhere they went, they taught other species the lesson they had learned on their dangerous home world. The lesson that had saved them when the Dominion came. The lesson that had changed the galaxy forever. Fear was natural. Fear was normal. But fear was also a choice. And there was another choice available. A strange and wonderful choice that the humans had, discovered long ago. You could laugh instead. In the halls of the Galactic Council, a phrase emerged to describe humanity. It was spoken in hundreds of languages, by thousands of species, and it always meant the same thing. Do not threaten the humans, they said. They do not process fear correctly. It was meant as a warning. But the humans heard it as a compliment. Velther, old noun surrounded by human friends, heard the phrase at a diplomatic gathering. A young alien official had spoken it in hushed tones, clearly nervous about the human delegates nearby. Velther laughed. It had taken him 50 years, but he had finally learned how. The humans nearby looked at him with surprise, then joined in. Soon the entire room was laughing, aliens and humans alike, and no one could quite remember what had started it, but that was humanity for you. They did not process fear correctly. They processed it as laughter, as courage, as the stubborn determination to keep going no matter what. And somehow, against all odds, that had been enough to change everything.